Good day, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this Food Safety Culture, How to Measure Food Safety webinar series, part of the webinar series. So you should be able to see the title screen and you should be able to hear me okay. And on your toolbar, on the webinar toolbar, you'll see a box that says questions. We want this to be interactive. We want you to be able to communicate with us. We have a phenomenal presenter and he will answer questions at the end. So we need to make sure you can hear us okay, you can see the title slide okay, and that you are comfortable putting some questions in that question box. So if you could let me know that you can hear okay and that you can see okay by typing something in, that'd be just fantastic. Wonderful. Thanks for everybody doing that. I always ask the question, is it warm where you are? Is it cold where you are? I mean, that's why, or where are you from? And it looks great that that information's coming through. So thanks to everybody. Listen, we have a fantastic speaker today. He's a food safety professional and industry, just a food safety specialist, been in the industry over 20 years. And where he really prides himself is his ability to work implementing food safety and quality improvement programs in manufacturing facilities. He's also an incredible coach, mentor, educator, trainer. He does a lot of training and he's just an all around, when it comes to food safety, he's an all around food safety professional. Let me just take a second to talk about our mission statement. I think it's important to understand one specific thing in our mission statement because our mission statement reads very much like your mission statement. We promote food integrity and equip our clients with knowledge because everyone deserves safe, high quality food. And it's that part that says equip our clients with knowledge. AIB International is a solutions provider. We like to take your complicated issues. I always ask people, what keeps you awake at night? And that problem that you have, that you worrying about, AIB International, with the phenomenal team that we have, can provide solutions to those very complicated problems. So again, our mission statement, very similar to your mission statement. And especially with the equip our clients with knowledge, I hope what we can accomplish today is we can equip you with some knowledge. So in the previous session, we talked about food safety culture, some definitions of food safety culture. We also talked about the invisible and visible food safety culture. You might remember the slide. It looked like an iceberg. Some of it was above the water, some of it was below the water. We also talked about food safety obstacles, the food safety cultural model, and how to develop food safety cultural framework. So Vikas, what are they going to hear about this session? Vikas, you must be muted because we're not hearing you.
Yeah, thanks, Judy, for that. Thank you, Judy, and hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the second session of this Food Safety Culture webinar. In today's session, we are going to cover a very important aspect of food safety culture, which is how to measure food safety culture. This process consists of four important elements. One, food safety audit and inspection, and how to use food safety audit and inspection as a tool to measure your food safety culture. The second is a food safety culture assessment. Third is how to use an EMS monitoring system as a part of your food safety culture assessment. And finally, food safety maturity assessment. Before moving into food safety culture measurement and techniques, I would like to take you once more through one of the most important steps in food safety culture planning. Identification of food safety obstacles. We discussed about this in last webinar, and today I'll be taking you a little more in detail about what a food safety obstacle and how to grade food safety obstacles. You all know that food safety culture is not something that comes overnight. It is something that comes with the years of hard work in an institution. Companies that have a deep-rooted food safety culture are always ready to change the old thoughts. They readily embrace the new thoughts and direction. And the most important aspect is these companies understand and identify the mistakes or obstacles well in advance. And they provide the right platform for self-analysis of the obstacles and all levels of the organization, because they collectively work to get rid of the obstacles that impact their culture. And finally, all these efforts play a big role in their success. When the site has a right view, getting rid of obstacles and embracing the changes are very easy. However, support from the senior management and top management is highly essential during the uncertainty or transitions. This allows everyone to embrace the full spectrum of challenges given by the new way of doing things. Most sites I have visited will have had several food safety obstacles. I've seen that during inspection, during audits, during training. I've seen several food safety obstacles. And in most cases, these obstacles hold them back from developing a great food safety culture. And this could be a long-term business continuity action that lack focus on food safety. One question often asked is, how do we streamline food safety culture in our organization? I often hear this many times during food safety culture assessment. And my answer to it always is that the problem is never how to get a new culture. It is how to get the food safety obstacles out of your organization. And this is the most important aspect which we all need to understand while we plan for a food safety culture. We all know from the previous webinar that food safety obstacle is a thought or action executed due to the influence of hardened food safety beliefs. So, identification of obstacles and destruction of hardened beliefs behind each or group of food safety obstacles identified is a key activity towards planning food safety culture. And it's a very important aspect, because if we don't identify the food safety obstacles as well as the hardened belief behind an individual or a group of food safety obstacle, we couldn't really plan or execute a food safety culture. Until we remove the obstacles, anything done towards the enhancement of food safety will never reach its actual intent. And we all understand that, because if it is not, the obstacles are not removed, the food safety expectations will never reach the intended expected state or position. If you want food safety to be embraced in your organization, then you need to remove this barrier created by obstacles. Remove the hardened belief all across the organization, and this must occur at all levels, right from the top management to the frontline worker. Once you remove these obstacles, then the employees will be able to see food safety with all its significance. And I have seen that several times. As you explain the expectation rights, as you remove the obstacles and the hardened beliefs behind it, and then there is a transparency of your food safety expectations are always on the higher side. The most important aspect, however, is to identify and classify the food safety obstacles. Now, the formation of obstacle, before understanding how to identify and classify food safety obstacles, the formation of obstacle is a very important aspect, and we need to also understand how these obstacles are formed. The formation of an obstacle will not happen suddenly. Most of the time, these obstacles will start by showing a few initial signs. Often, when you conduct an audit, you see certain things or certain findings or deviations happening once in a while. I'm not talking about these once in a while kind of an observation. However, once you start noticing such challenges on a regular basis or on a day-to-day basis, then you should realize that it's more than symptoms. It's an early warning indicator. Once you start seeing such incidents on a regular basis, you should think, basically what's happening is that people don't care about it. Then the condition has moved from just a symptom into a hardened belief. So you can see a hardened belief is being shaped regarding the food safety expectation, the way they want to implement food safety all across the organization. And every ardent belief will have one or several psychological barrier which drives the action. This is because the psychological barriers that develop the hardened belief within a specific group, an employer, or an organization as a whole. So the psychological barrier behind every hardened belief and the hardened belief behind a single food safety obstacle or a group of obstacle is something we need to really identify and eliminate or eradicate from our system. Now we need to understand that these psychological barriers create the obstacles and then slowly the cultural distortion. Most of the time, companies will notice this deterioration in their culture only after a critical food safety issue like a major recall. By then, it will be too late. So identification of food safety obstacle, grading the obstacle, identifying the barrier and hardened belief behind each food safety obstacle, and also assessing the impact of food safety culture, obstacles on food safety culture is very important 4 steps while planning your food safety culture upgradation or development. Now let's see, before conducting a food safety obstacle assessment, there are a few prerequisites we have to conduct. We all understand that food safety obstacles and the damage they can pose to the culture of the organization. But before we do an obstacle assessment, we need to gather enough information from within the company so that we can do a detailed obstacle assessment. Now we are going to discuss how to identify and grade food safety obstacles. The big question always I hear is, where should we start? We know that we have a lot of obstacles. We know that many of the time it's because of a hardened belief or a psychological barrier behind it. But from where should we start? What should we do next? The answer is very simple. Let's look at a few of the most validated methods to identify the food safety obstacles of your company. I mean, the sources to identify the food safety obstacle. You're very familiar with a few of them. Number one, review the results of your internal audit and evaluate the audit trends. The number two, look at customer complaints, include employee survey of top management food safety decisions, because this historical information provides a great insight into your company culture. And then the obstacles will slowly come clearer and clearer by day. We often think we need to bring something from outside. And this is one question always here. What should I do? And we always think we need to bring an inspector from outside. We need to do we need to spend a lot of money to assess the culture. Yes, it's not a bad idea to bring an inspector and do a cultural assessment, but there are many things which you can do within your company using the sources of data available with you. In fact, all the information required to identify the food safety obstacle and correct them already exists in your company. Obstacles, the biggest challenge is that we are not using the right tool. So that's one thing we need to be focusing on. It's a matter of polishing, buffing, and then using the same tools, the conventional tool of inspection, customer complaint, employee survey, and all those things to make sure that the food safety obstacles, the hardened beliefs, as well as the cultural deterioration is identified. When you do internal audits, you see certain things happening once in a while. For example, a drip of water from an overhead drain went unnoticed by an employee. A debris on the floor was missed by a cleaning crew. This could be a sign of obstacle formation, but generally we miss that. We think, okay, it's very normal, but this could be signs of an obstacle formation. While doing an obstacle assessment, we need to select these kind of repeated observation. For example, if you see certain things happening on a regular basis within your company, we need to start identifying those repeated observation, which you identify during internal inspection, audits, certain information you get from your employee survey or customer complaints. This helps to establish whether it's a real food safety obstacle, which could have an impact on future culture of the organization. Similarly, we can use audit trends, customer complaints, and employee survey as an input for food safety obstacle assessment. The data collected should be consolidated. Those observations which don't have significance, like one-time occurrence with low food safety risk, should be omitted. The focus should be given to repeated observation or one-time observation with very high food safety significance. Now let's talk a bit about one of the obstacle identification tool, inspection. The periodic inspection of process and practices is a conventional way of looking into organizational food safety culture. The AIP GMP inspection is commonly used to identify the status of food safety culture of an organization. Our inspections are not specifically designed to identify the challenges in food safety culture. They don't identify the positive trends of food safety culture. However, by conducting a thorough inspection, most of the time we identify the food safety challenge. We can point out the behavioral deviation. We can help point out the root cause analysis why a food safety practice is going wrong. Inspection is always a great tool to identify the maturity of your food safety culture. Always make sure when you do an inspection, connect the dots between the program and practices. It's very important of connecting the dots. Don't just identify one observation, correct it by providing a corrective action. I often see that during inspection. You just pick one single observation, you fix it, you take a corrective action, and don't evaluate what's the big picture. Is it a problem with one single program, or it's just a practice, or both program or practice is not effectively functioning? And that's very important to do that, plus the root cause analysis to identify what is the kind of obstacle, and what is the hardened belief, and what is the kind of deterioration that's happening, or a psychological barrier which stops us from executing that specific activity. As discussed before, results of inspection can one of the inputs of your food safety obstacle assessment. However, while doing an inspection or audit, there is a few things which I would like to remind you from my experience that which you need to really focus on. It's a very common practice to have a food safety inspection or audit, and most of the time we do some of the inspection on a scheduled basis, maybe daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. And most of the time these audits will be one-sided. An auditor inspects or audits the site, and the auditee listens to the auditor. The auditor might behave like a policeman, charging the auditee for things not done as per his or her expectation. In such systems, we don't see smart food safety conversation between the auditor and the auditee. This provides a clear sign to the employee that we respect. The two-way conversation is highly important during this kind of audit, because most of the time when you do these kind of audits, you see a one-side communication. The auditor speaks, and then the auditee gives explanation or justification. But what we normally recommend is a two-way conversation, and it's very important to have a two-way conversation between the auditor and the auditee. Why? Because this provides a clear sign to the employee that we respect what they have to say. The second benefit is that you may hear great points from these employees. They are the ones who work very close to the system. They know their equipment better than us. They know the day-to-day activities better than us. So always try to create a two-way conversation during your inspection. And it's also very important because as you talk with them, as you discuss more with the employees, slowly you will identify the root cause behind the obstacle, and what the obstacle is, and what's the hardened belief, and is there any psychological barrier which prevents him from executing a specific food safety practice or expectation. By doing this, we know the process much better than most of us know before the audit. Daily walkthrough is the best practice for those companies who would like to improve and measure food safety culture. And it's always a good practice to do a daily inspection because it's a very dynamic environment. Things are changing on a daily basis. So this is also another way you can use audit to identify the obstacles. Basically, when you do a daily inspection, the intention is always again to have a great food safety conversation with employees as a part of measurement, okay? And always provide an opportunity for employees to open up, okay? Let them discuss their concerns, let them discuss their opinion and suggestion related to food safety, okay? And you should use the daily walkthrough for having a great conversation with the team members. Try to understand their perspective about a specific point identified during the walkthrough. This will assist employees to share their insight and also help you to identify the root cause. And another important aspect is always communicate the action plans and timeline with employees. Always communicate the corrective action, the status of corrective action, and escalate to the next level is required. Define a trend of your overall food safety issue and always communicate the effectiveness of the action plan executed. This teamwork will help you to really identify the food safety issues and categorize the food safety obstacles, identify the hardened beliefs, root cause, and the real root cause for the deterioration in cultures. Always use inspection, audits, and the two-way communication methodology to improve your obstacle assessment process. This is a sample obstacle assessment and grading sheet. This is a simple example or how can you do an obstacle assessment. If you see the first column, it consists of input or repeated observations gathered from various sources. If you see the second column consists of the source. So in case number 1, the source is external audit or internal audit finding. So the observation is in column number 1, followed by source. And then we need to assess the nature of that specific issue. Then identify the severity of that issue. And then using an AIB obstacle assessment matrix, you have to identify whether this is an obstacle or not. And then grade it on a low, medium, high, based on the severity, based on the nature. And if it's an obstacle, then there's another matrix by which you can assess what's the grade of that specific obstacle. And the next column is the most important part, which talks about the barrier. The barrier is always the immediate answer you get most of the time when you say this. Why there is spider crack notice on acrylic sheet and they say that we don't have time. And then the further you investigate, you interact, you put the forum open, as I told you, the two-way communication open, then they will open up more and then they will really provide you some insight. And it takes some time. It's not an easy thing to go from barrier to the root cause or an investigation to root cause because it takes a lot of time in most cases. So if you see here, once you go to the hardened belief or root cause, the root cause is like they have more important things to do. And then you go to the next slide, you evaluate what is the impact of this specific observation on the overall food safety culture. So here, we are just discussing about how you can identify those observations, put the source, nature and severity, obstacle, grading, barrier, hardened belief, investigation, root cause, and then the impact of that obstacle in the overall food safety culture. As we don't have time, we have not covered the metrics, AIB metrics in detail in this specific session. Another tool by which you can do a food safety assessment or a measurement of food safety culture is a food safety culture assessment tool. The food safety culture assessment tool includes a detailed review of organization food safety culture. Components of food safety culture will be assessed. Detailed assessment with active interaction will take place, and an overall picture of the food safety culture will be assessed. AIB International has a product which we call as a food safety culture assessment, and this is a simple example of a small checklist which you have posted in this presentation for your information. It's basically a checklist-based inspection where we'll be going through certain questions and all those specific points will be covered, and then the entire food safety culture will be covered. So this is another way to assess the food safety culture or measure the current food safety culture. Another way to review or assess or measure food safety culture is to review the near misses. So basically what happens here is we review the root cause and resultant corrective action and preventive actions for those events which is happening on a regular basis or a near misses. Most of the time, these near misses will be something related to CCP, product safety, or something specific to a basic GMP. So assessing these near misses is a great tool to measure the food safety culture of the organization. And the last one for this webinar is AIB Food Safety Maturity Assessment Metrics. This is another way which you can measure the food safety culture of an organization. The AIB model for maturity assessment is based on 6 major elements of food safety culture, which are food safety expectation and commitment, food safety leadership and empowerment, food safety communication plan, cultivating food safety culture, food safety measurement, food safety recognition, and food safety sustenance. If you see the top portion of that chart, you will also see 4 key attributes to drive food safety culture on the top, which are system, knowledge, behavior, and process. So these 6 food safety culture elements and 4 attributes of food safety culture are assessed using 48 components. So every specific attribute is having 2 specific components in that. And those 48 components will be assessed, and the grading of high, medium, low, or negligible will be assessed. And then each element will assess against 4 attributes and 8 components coming under each attribute. Based on the outcome of the analysis, each element will be provided with a score. The sum of 6 element score will provide a total score. This is correlated to the overall maturity of the site. So this is a matrix where we deep dive into the micro elements of those attributes, those components which have an impact on your food safety culture, and each and every component will be assessed and a score will be provided, and then the assessment score will be ranged based on high, medium, low, and negligible, which is defined like embedded in the system for high, initiated by not embedded in the system as medium, not initiated with no workforce engagement as low, and negligible with no plans to initiate. Once we complete this activity of assessment, the site maturity will be graded into 5 levels based on the outcome of the maturity assessment. The 5 maturity levels are uncertainty, another way, we don't know what is right, but we follow. Reactive, we are always late for response. Neutral, few food safety issues are important, not all. Anticipative, we plan well for safeguarding food safety. And the final one, the most important and significant, incorporative. Food safety is an integral part of the business. So based on the overall score, the food safety level will be distributed among one of these specific levels, and that's your overall grading after a maturity assessment. So this is another way to assess your food safety culture. AIB maturity assessment incorporates even the smallest elements that impact the overall food safety culture. This will assist any organization to understand the maturity of their food safety culture. With this, we come to the conclusion of this webinar. Let's summarize what we have covered during the session. We covered the sources for conducting obstacle assessment, how to grade the food safety obstacle, but we couldn't able to cover the real grading process and the metrics of grading because of time constraint, how to identify and classify obstacles, and the few tools which we can use to measure food safety culture. With that, thank you everyone for attending the session, and see you all for the next webinar.
That was wonderful, Vicus. And there's a lot of questions. We have a lot of people. We basically, I know we're, trying to do this with remote technology, but I will tell you it's a full house. The room is full. There's also a lot of questions. And many of you are asking questions about, will you get a copy of this presentation and all that? You absolutely. So don't ever worry about that. We'll make sure you have everything that you're asking for. So let's start with some of the questions. First question is, and there's several questions about it, so it might be something that we want to go back and take a look at. It says, what is the scale for nature here? On the obstacle chart, there's the scale, and you have nature. What is nature? What does it mean, and how do you measure it?
Yeah, that's why I was just explaining during the session, because of the time constraint, I couldn't take all the attendees to the detailing of what is the nature and how we assess the nature. Nature is basically what this observation is about. Is it a critical observation? Is it a minor kind of an observation? Is it a repeated observation? So that's what the nature is all about. And we have a separate metrics and definition defined for before you grade from a scale of 1 to 5. So that's how we have defined it. So that's basically based on the criticality, the repeatability of this observation. The nature of that observation will be graded from a scale of 1 to 5.
That's great. Here's another question. If we don't have an internal audit system in place, should we set one up? And if so, how do we do this? How do we go about this?
All right, great question. If you don't have an internal audit, then the biggest challenge we face is like we are not really evaluating whether we are doing is meeting the food safety expectations or quality expectations set by the company. So the best thing to do is to put your food safety expectation right, develop standard operating procedure, work instructions, and all those information, and set your food safety expectation right. Train people on those food safety expectations, and train a food safety internal audit team, train them well, train them on the audit skills, and then start an internal audit regime, which can include a physical inspection of the site as well as a documentary review. I think that's something you have to start.
Here's a question, and this is a tricky question. It says, how long does it take to get a great food safety culture? That's a tricky one.
That's a very tricky question. I think more than getting a food safety culture, you need to really identify how long it will take to identify my food safety obstacles. I think that's the most important thing, because these obstacles are hidden inside your facility, in some corners, because of some reason, because of some hardened belief behind each obstacle or groups of it. So the most important aspect is to identify the obstacles. Once you identify the obstacle and start fine-tuning it, buffing it, polishing it in such a way that these obstacles are removed or slowly vanish from your system, then reaching that destination is, it's just a matter of time. There is no magic formula as such, friends, but you need to identify the obstacles. You need to have a real good system support from the top management. You need to imbibe the food safety expectations, and we need to publicly say food safety culture is not just a priority, it's a belief within the organization. Then it's just a matter of time. But if you think that food safety culture is just a checklist or a tick on a checklist, it will take years, or at times it doesn't happen at all.
You're right, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. You're right.
That's right.
This person is asking, they're saying, we're having difficulty in completing our final assessment. What steps do we take to complete this?
I'm sorry, Judy. I didn't understand that question well.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. They said they're having some difficulty completing their final assessment. What steps should they take to complete this? And that's okay. If you don't understand it, we could ask the gentleman to maybe resubmit another question.
Maybe send a mail.
Yep, we can resubmit. Ask, and please, if because there's a lot of questions, so if it doesn't get answered, we'll make sure we answer your questions. But if that's not, please resubmit that, and we'll do a better job of interpreting that. Why is the food safety maturity assessment so important?
Yeah, good question. Food safety maturity assessment. If you see I've given you examples of a few measurement tools like inspection, near miss issues, audits. Those are good tools, or great tools. Even the food safety cultural assessment, which AIB, which was one of our products, those are great tools. But the difference between a normal inspection, a culture assessment versus maturity assessment is maturity assessment covers small micro level components and attributes that impacts the overall culture of the organization. So we are not talking on a macro level, we are talking on a micro level. We are going to detail of each and every attributes and components that has an impact on food safety culture from our experience, and then evaluating it, and based on which you identify the metrics. So that's more a realistic data based on factual information rather than an aesthetics or a peripheral data gathering or data analysis. So it's very detailed information and analysis.
There's several folks that want to know if we have sample forms that may be available, some templates.
Yeah, I need to check that with the sales and marketing department, and we'll revert on that point.
Okay, this person says, we're a GFSI certified plant. What would be the expected food safety culture maturity level?
Yeah, I think for a GFSI scheme, whether it's BRC or any other scheme, I think you need to stick to the standard requirement as per the standard, and that's what should be your aim to achieve. However, the most important aspect is, yeah, you can have a specific food safety culture model to satisfy your GFSI scheme or any scheme. Okay, that's fine. But the most important aspect is that, have you done a good homework? Have you done a good assessment? Have you really assessed the food safety culture? And is your assessment adding value to your system? And that's the most important thing. After the assessment, after the food safety culture evaluation and planning, whether you are seeing changes happening in the organization, whether it's employee empowerment, the culture, whether they're publicly recognized, whether the management is publicly recognizing food safety, whether employees are publicly talking to each other about food safety, whether food safety is in the air, whether the food safety language is spoken by everyone. That's what the difference is about. If that's happening within your organization, irrespective of the standard you follow, the intent of food safety culture is met.
That's really a great job. And everybody, I know we're over on time, so we're going to wrap it up here. But I want to make sure I say thank you to everybody. I again appreciate your attendance. We really did have a full house. Vikas, thank you for once again an outstanding job, and we look forward to the next session.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone. See you all.